We're back at the Global Goals Studio. With many countries and regions in some form of a lockdown, tight travel restrictions are severely impacting the global migrant community. In addition, with much of the world's attention on the pandemic, the issue of reaching out and helping these marginalized communities has not been front and center. With us today to talk about possible solutions are Patrick McGrory, member and fundraising chair of the Global Solidarity Fund, Father Leonir Chiarello, Superior General of the Scalabrinian Missionaries, and Rebecca Marmot, Chief Sustainability Officer at Unilever. Father Leonir, I'd like to start with you. With an estimated 280 million migrants and refugees around the world today, and in the midst of a global pandemic, of course, their need for help is very great. Can you tell us a little about how the Global Solidarity Fund connects faith actors like the Catholic Church with private sector companies who actually need good workers?
Yes, faith-based organizations, including the Catholic religious congregations, are working closely with migrants and refugees on the ground, specifically at the community level. We are providing them different development and protection programs to facilitate their social and economic integration into the host society. And from this perspective, the Global Solidarity Fund is supporting the interconnection, the collaboration between the religious congregations and the private sector to provide migrants and refugees decent work. Like people everywhere, migrants and refugees, they want to be independent. And by providing them decent jobs is the best way to provide them these integrations. So the Global Solidarity Fund is fostering these synergies between the Catholic congregations, the private sector, and philanthropies, governments, and international organizations, supporting them to finding coherent solutions for the needs of marginalized people, including migrants and refugees.
Pat McGrory, what makes this form of outreach between faith communities and the private sector unique?
Yeah, to pick up with what Father Leonir was saying, the Global Solidarity Fund is a collection of business and philanthropic leaders, and the world's really coming together. We have all been impressed and inspired by the work of women and men religious, like Father Leonir Scalabrini's. We're also inspired by the global goals for 2030, and also the moral leadership of Pope Francis and the entirety of the Catholic Church. The Global Solidarity Fund is really unique because we're serving as a knowledge and wisdom broker in the form of a partnership network, ultimately with the goal of increasing impact at scale with the various projects around the world. We're going to serve as a catalyst for the value add and partnerships. And ultimately, we know who's doing amazing work, more importantly, that's replicable. So for many businesses, the time is now to take advantage of the opportunity, especially those who are focusing on increasing their social impact. And the Global Solidarity Fund is very highly efficient at increasing that impact. And it's a great way to get involved in that world-changing movement.
Please stay with us. You're watching the Global Goals Studio. Welcome back to the Global Goals Studio, where we're talking about faith, migrants, and the workforce. Rebecca Marmot from Unilever, your company recently announced a series of commitments, one being to help 10 million young people gain skills. But Unilever has also got a good history of hiring migrants and immigrants. Why do you do that, and how can you help encourage other companies to follow suit?
Hi, thanks very much for inviting me to join this conversation today. I think we've seen social inequality is getting worse. A couple of studies out recently from Edelman and the Oxford study out earlier this week really showing that social divide is exacerbated further by COVID. And I think that has impacted refugees and displaced communities. You talked a little bit about some of the social commitments which we announced earlier this month, and I'm sure we'll come back to that. Specifically on refugees, I think we try to help in three ways. One, around resilience. So actually thinking about how can we better prepare communities around the world where Unilever is operating to prepare themselves in advance, look at how we can protect livelihoods from smallholder farmers through to small-scale shopkeepers. We've worked, for example, with groups like the Humanitarian Leadership Academy to help to better train communities to prepare for uncertainty. I think the second part's around relief. Just recently, we launched with the FCDO here in the UK, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, a programme called the Hygiene and Behaviour Change Coalition. So looking at how can we make sure that the most vulnerable communities around the world, many of whom are in potentially a refugee camp or displaced peoples camp, still have access to important hygiene products and also key behaviour change programmes to ensure that they're as protected as possible. If you think, for example, in a situation like Cox's Bazar, where 1 million refugees are living socially distancing or being able to access necessarily the right kind of hygiene products isn't necessarily an option. So we've worked very hard with groups like UNHCR and the IRC, looking at how we can reach refugees around the world with those kind of behaviour change interventions and infrastructure provisions.
Okay, we're going to take another short break here. Please stay with us. We're talking about very important subjects around migrants and the workforce. You're watching the Global Goals Studio. Welcome back to the Global Goals Studio, where we're talking about migrants, refugees, and the workforce. Father Leonir, according to a new study from the New American Research Fund, nearly half of all Fortune 500 companies were actually founded by immigrants or their children. How do you focus your negotiations with governments when you're talking about receiving immigrants in that light?
Yes, considering the shared responsibilities between the government, the private sector, and civil society organizations, including the Catholic organizations, with the receiving countries' governments, we are discussing how to provide a better governance for migration flows. And our negotiations with them, with the governments, are focused on three main aspects: the definition, the implementation, and the monitoring of policies and programs to protect and promote human development of migrants and refugees and the hosting society. So at the national level, for example, we have been negotiating with the government's legal channels to provide the private sector, to provide them legal channels in order to regularly hire migrants and refugees. And on the other hand, providing the migrants the regular channels to be hired and to be integrated in the private sector. At the international level, for example, we have been engaged with the religious congregations with the process of definition of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, or the Global Compacts on Migrants and Refugees. And currently, we are actively engaged in the implementation of these United Nations processes. These are examples of promoting the integration of migrants, not only as people who need protection and support, but as main actors of development, as you mentioned. Yep. Many of the companies around the world are established by migrants and refugees. And from this perspective, the Global Solidarity Fund is supporting the advancement of these dialogues, these innovative dialogues and negotiations for an inclusive economy in which migrants and refugees are included as main partners, not only people who are in the distorted perception sometimes they are stealing jobs. No, they are providing jobs. They are providing enhancing the economy.
Yeah, and talking of partners, Rebecca Marmot from Unilever. Unilever, obviously a multinational corporation. You've got a footprint all across the world. How is Unilever leveraging its resources in this area?
Well, you talked a couple of minutes ago about some of the new commitments that we made last week. What we've tried to do is to think right the way across our whole ecosystem, so all the different touch points. So we said that we want to ensure that everyone who directly provides or delivers goods and services to our company earns a living wage or a living income by 2030. We're going to spend $2 billion annually with suppliers owned and managed by people from underrepresented groups by 2025. So looking at how can we bring smaller and medium-sized enterprises, perhaps refugee-owned enterprises, into our supply chain. You mentioned we're committing to help equip 10 million young people outside of our business with the essential skills to help prepare them for future job opportunities. So that's really about skills building, thinking about work experience, thinking about the kind of skills of the future that people will need. So massive ramping up, for example, on digital capabilities. And I think when you look and you think about how we can do that, particularly trying to help to hire refugees, it's a huge opportunity for us to benefit as a business. We're very lucky to have worked with groups like the Tent Partnership for Refugees for the past 3 years. We can hire refugees into our business and they bring a brilliant perspective, different kind of skills, really important for us to be able to provide employment and livelihoods opportunities, but also for us to benefit from that. For example, we have what we call the Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream Entrepreneurs Network. We run that in partnership with the ICE Academy, so providing employment and entrepreneurship programs, helping refugees integrate better in society and access economic opportunities. So we've trained up refugees who've come into countries in Western Europe to work within our business. We've also benefited in other ways. For example, we've recruited special language refugees to help us in some of our customer call centers. And then we've tried really hard through the power of some of our brands to actually encourage more of a conversation around that. So, for example, Ben & Jerry's launched a special Cone Together flavor ice cream last December to really try and get that conversation going. It was hosted by the UN in Geneva.
That's a great point. Patrick McGrory, last word to you, just briefly, beyond the basics of food, clothing, and shelter, what's the one thing that can help marginalized people find stability today?
Yeah, bringing together what was just said, I think it's a simple answer. It's good jobs. Father Leonir touched on the inclusive economy. That really is the key to improving livelihoods for people, especially those who are most vulnerable. And we know that good jobs leads to improved health outcomes and better social integration, ultimately stronger communities. And the Global Solidarity Fund, we're focusing on creating good jobs, improving private sector partnerships, and really improving the lives of the migrants, refugees, and immigrants all around the world. So for those businesses who are interested in these types of opportunities, the Global Solidarity Fund may just be a good fit, and we can continue the conversation.
Well, it's vital work. Thank you for doing it. And thank you for being here with us today, Patrick McGrory from the Global Solidarity Fund, Father Leonir Chiarello, and Rebecca Marmot. Please stay with us. You're watching the Global Goals Studio.